Alright, listen. I know you want new weapons. We all do. But weapons are some of the hardest items to create due to how easy it is to ruin a game and a player's experience due to balance issues. So I get it. I get why we don't get weapons very often. But as a substitute, why don't we look at the sort of weapons we could have almost gotten into the game? Oh, item attributes, you painfully long list of around 1,000+ entries, and how you've haunted me while researching this video. Now, what are item attributes? Item attributes are bits of code which tell the game what effects items and weapons have. Each item attribute has 5 different parts to them. The first is the ID number. This tells us roughly around the time of which the attribute was added, since they were generally added in chronologically one after another ID-wise. Next is the name, which is the internal name of the attribute and often can act as an introduction to what the attribute does. After that is, of course, the description, which is what shows up to the players on the weapon or item's description. Because of how this works, many item attributes are actually solely used as a flavor text. You know, the stuff that explains the durati, how it says it coats the enemies in your golden liquid and it can be used to extinguish teammates with humiliation. Yeah, stuff like that are considered separate attributes. Fourthly is the value type. The value type tells the game how it should be formatted for display. The possible types are additive percentage, and inverted percentage. Basically, this determines how the attribute is supposed to act. Lastly is the class, which defines where the attribute should be applied and what area it belongs to. Does this make sense? If not, in layman's terms, with a layman's example, this is the thing that lets communist boy here gain crits on kill with these boxing gloves he's wearing. So the interesting thing about this is that there are a ton of unused item attributes that still exist within the game, many of which were meant to be weapon stats. Some of these can be theorized to be beta versions of existing weapons, while others likely were entirely different weapons that never got through testing, but had their attributes left within the game. Today we'll be going through some of the most interesting item attributes and theorizing what they may have been used for. Since item attributes are a thing to give non-stock weapons their unique stats, these began to be added in the Gold Rush update, since that was the first time non-stock weapons were introduced. Additionally, since there are over 1,000 of these things, only the unused ones I found the most interesting are going to be discussed. If you're interested in reading through this monster of a list, I'll leave the link below to the wiki page. The way this video will work is anytime I start talking about something speculative, something that doesn't have a source to be based on, you'll hear this sound and see this word pop up on the screen. I will also be going through mostly chronologically, so when I mention an attribute, I'll state around which major update it was added, just to help you guys get a vague understanding of the time frame these were added. So buckle up, kiddos, because this is going to be a tsunami of information and theorization being thrown at you. The first 2 item attributes we'll be looking at are 13 and 14. Already we have some very interesting weapon attributes, this time around for the Minigun. Both focus on overheal, with 13 being an overheal bonus that would have made it so that overheal decay took longer to decay, and 14 completely disabled the overheal decay mechanic. Now, since this attribute was added very early on during the Gold Rush update, there are very few Miniguns this could have been used for. In fact, the only other Minigun at this time was the Kritzkrieg, which was added in said update. So likely, this was part of the Kritzkrieg before the Kritzkrieg became the bringer of Kritzening before Marasmus brought the Kritzening. I find it hard to believe it was simply an added stat to the Kritzkrieg we have today, since that would have really stacked the stats of a single weapon. Moving on to an attribute added in around the Heavy update is one of the most perplexing weapon stats in the entire list. Attribute 30 describes Fist having a radial buff. On kill, these fists would have given 50 HP to nearby teammates and a 10% crit chance for them as well. Note that it specifically mentions fists, meaning that it was something meant for a heavy melee. Nothing like this exists in the game aside from the basic idea of an AoE effect, something later used for the Amputator's taunt. Originally, I thought this was an original version of the KGB, since that was the only other alternate heavy melee at the time. But thanks to Sigsiev, we know that it was an entirely separate scrapped melee item as well, as kills would have caused the user to taunt. What's odd is that out of every attribute that specifically uses the set_weapon_mode, this one is the only unused one within the game. Every single one of the other ones all linked to existing weapons. A support weapon for heavy is a really interesting choice, but this idea was likely changed due to how powerful it could have been. While heavy getting a melee mid-fight is pretty low, I mean, who would want to switch off shooting the lovely Sasha, Natasha, Svetlana, Oksana, and Sheila? The power this thing could have had is immense, not only instantly healing all your teammates for 50 health, a likely lifesaver in many cases, but the increase in crit chance in a game where random crits are widely hated would have likely caused many broken keyboards. I can understand why this was scrapped. 39 tells us of a damage penalty versus non-stun players. Supposedly and fittingly, this was an original downside for the Sandman, since it was the OG stun item of the game. 40, 41, 42, 46, and 47 were all meant for a scrap sniper primary called the Walkabout. Its stats would have looked something like this mock-up card I'm throwing on screen right now. Despite the fact that this weapon never came out, 41 and 42 were later recycled for the Sydney Sleeper, which we all know lacks the ability to truly headshot and has an increased charge rate. Moving on to the Scout update, we have Attribute 49, which would have disabled Scout's double jump. Not much to say about this one, but it would have clipped one of Boston Boy's most useful ability, hence why it was likely scrapped. According to the wiki, this was formerly a negative of the Sandman that was later changed to the negative 15 health we know and not necessarily love today. Attribute 53 is directly linked to another scrapped weapon concept, the Fire Retardant suit. This attribute and subsequently item would have made it so that a player was unable to be ignited. The suit went through two variations, one which granted immunity to afterburn and likely used Attribute 53, and the other one was reduced fire damage by 90%. Like the Walkabout, the Fire Retardant suit had its stats reused, this time technically both. The Spicicle has both an afterburn immunity and a fireproof ability when melted. This suit was likely scrapped due to balancing purposes. Aside from the fact that it would straight up replace the revolver, as it was a secondary item, it was also a direct and huge counter to the Pyro, Spy's natural counter. 80 and 81 specify max metal increases and decreases. Though this idea, but not specific attribute, would later be used in an MVM upgrade, this could have likely been linked to a scrapped wrench or more likely PDA. We know PDAs and other NG buildings have been in development in the past, but they've all just been scrapped, and this is likely an old piece of a long-trashed PDA that would have allowed different buildings. Within the war update, we have 98 being a bit of a mystery since it's very poorly worded. Its name is self-damage on hit for rapid fire, but both its class and its description of on-hit percentage health makes it sound more like it acted along the lines of the black box's health regen stat, but seemingly for a rapid fire weapon. The curious thing is this is actually sandwiched between the projectile and rocket launcher attributes. So what this could have been used for was some sort of rapid fire projectile weapon, likely a rocket launcher due to where it's placed on the list. This could have been the start of the Black Box development, and if it was, they likely realized a rapid fire rocket launcher that healed on hit was either unbalanced or too hard to balance. 112 and 113 have to do with ammo and metal regen respectively. We know a metal regen was later added as an engineer upgrade for MVM, but an ammo one that acted along the same lines never was. I had heard the beta version of MVM originally had a sniper upgrade for regenning ammo that ended up getting scrapped due to how powerful it was, but I was unable to actually find a source, so grain of salt here, kiddos. The engineer update was bound to bring an NG-specific weapon, so we have 148, which would have reduced the cost of buildings. It's unknown what this was for, but I see two possible options. One would be that it was an overall cost reduction, which would be a pretty big balance change, and the other was it was related to a scrapped building. However, this could actually be used for the Gunslinger since it grants the ability to build a mini-sentry which does cost less metal than a normal one. Although this particular attribute is labeled as unused, I can't seem to find another one for the Gunslinger itself, so it is possible. Moving along to the Man Economy update, we have a bunch of interesting Flamethrower attributes. 161, 162, 163, and 164 are all related to attributes of flames. 161 and 162 deal with the flame size, and 163 and 164 have to do with the flame's life. Along with 165 being for a charged air blast, and this was around the time the Degreaser came out, these could have been what the Degreaser was originally going to be, a flamethrower meant to essentially bully the enemy team, or like any other option, it was for a scrapped weapon. Regardless, I really liked the idea of a chargeable air blast, however it was likely removed due to the fact that it increased the knockback received from the compression blast, resulting in not just more disruption and disorientation, but also people trying to constantly go for environmental kills. 167 and 168 describe disguise attributes that were never actually implemented. 167 is a disguise reduction while disguised, and 168 gives the user immunity to fire damage while disguised. This likely was originally attached to the year or channel reward since it came out around the same time and had special disguising parameters. If not, since it's related to disguises, it could have been for a scrap disguise kit. However, the kit would also have needed some downsides to these fantastic upsides, which I don't seem to see listed. Now, sidetracking just a bit here, we have attributes 230, 232, 233, 234, 239, and 242, which were all related to the Pocket Rocket Launcher. What's the Pocket Rocket Launcher, you might ask? Only the most hilariously selfish weapon ever conceived. This thing was made for metacogging and it had 3 different variations. The first used attribute 230, which would have given the soldier 2 revenge crits when his pocket medic was killed. The second version uses 239, which would have given the medic a 15% bonus in Uber charge rate, which of course is disabled in spawn, so they couldn't easily abuse it. Lastly, version 3 would have allowed the user to have 50% faster reload time while being healed. The entire idea for this launcher was likely scrapped not only due to its abusability, but the fact that it full-on promotes pocketing and selfish healers. No one likes a medic that ignores your burning body at 10 HP just because that burly American in front of him can give him more assists. Moving on to the Ebert update, we have what's likely a spy-specific attribute. Skipping forward for a second, 336 details hiding enemy health, an ability that the spy was the only one to have in the first place, as well as medic using the Solemn Vow, which was also added in this patch. This means the most likely weapon for these were either the Enforcer or the Big Earner, since they too were introduced in the Uber update. However, the Eurytonal Reward seems like the best candidate for this attribute since it's the only knife that deals with an altering disguise ability. If you pair this with attributes 167 and or 168, this seems like it could have been a decent downside for a weapon that would have given reduced damage or fire immunity. Getting back on track in the chronological order, 244 and 245 give the user bonus rage on hit and boost the player's damage as the rage increases respectively. I'm unsure of what this could have been for, but it could have been for another soldier backpack or as an MVM upgrade since this was the time when MVM specific attributes started showing up. 325 was meant to be a currency bonus from the money drop in MVM. It's unknown what this was for exactly, but it could have either been an upgrade or an extra ability for a class, such as how Scout has the special ability of double money pickup radius. 339 and 340 reveal cloaked and disguised victims on hit. What I believe this may have been originally for was the Pompton, which came out around Australian Christmas 2011, a few months after the Uber update. The reason I think this is that the Pompton already has a special attribute that drains both cloak and Uber charge, so the weapon was already meant to have a unique property. Its original purpose could have been an even bigger middle finger to spies, but if so, I think that's the exact reason why it was scrapped, the same reasoning as the fire retardant suit. That being it was too much of a counter, so they just went with a slight cloak drain. 341 likely loops back to being an MVM upgrade, with its Girardian Backstabbers. This was obviously meant as a Razorback upgrade, and honestly would have made it slightly more viable, so I'm not sure why it would have been removed. It's likely they just wanted to cement in the fact that the Girardi was a must-pick in MVM. Since this video is way longer than I'd like it to be, despite the fact that I am talking very fast, we're gonna do a lightning round of miscellaneous and weird item attributes that mostly have no reason to exist, but are weird enough to warrant mentioning. So let's go! 145, taunt is high 5, damage penalty. 195, always tradable, which for some reason is labeled as a negative. 214, kill eater, which is the internal name for stranges. 322, taunt is press and hold, which also has a damage penalty. 409, kills force user to laugh, probably the original functionality of the holiday punch, who knows. 415 counts as an assister with some kind of pet. This update's going to be awesome. Looks to be a hint towards Pyromania since the ARG was starting up around this time and pets were introduced in that update. 450 zombie 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 zombie. 752 is Geiger counter? Invasion maybe? 718 is a sword. What is that even for? This was way after swords were introduced into the game. And we're only a little over halfway done. Good God, I need to speed this up. Script writing me, start condensing stuff. We don't want to lose the viewers we still have. Got it, editing me. It's time for Australian Christmas, and it brought with it attribute 354, stun enemies wielding the same weapon. Maybe this was the original functionality of the half Satoichi, though it came out before Australian Christmas. 366 is a weird one, as it describes stunning an enemy if they're hit from their belt being at or above the player's eye level. Honestly, I have no idea what this one is, but it sounds like a scout weapon, and the Rap Assassin was introduced in this update. Moving away from the Christmas season, Pyromania burned away the snow in the tree and forced attribute 407 and 408 on us. Truly nightmarish ones that would have given the user crits versus disguise and non-burning players. Since this is during Pyromania, this was likely a beta Scorch Shot attribute, since a Flamethrower that did crits to disguise enemies is absolutely ridiculous, and doing crits to non-burning enemies makes absolutely no sense on a Flamethrower. On the flip side, 427 specifies Sapper damage leeching health, which is actually a really interesting idea for a Sapper. In my opinion, a Sapper like this would have incentivized spies to actually go out and sap the Texans' babies. However, it could have proven too hard for an engineer to take a spy out while multiple buildings were being sapped. This could have been the original functionality of the Red Tape Recorder since it was released after Pyromania that August. Replacing the flames of Pyromania with the mechanized workings of the Mecha update, we have attribute 471, generate building rescue energy on damage. Due to the timing and the wording, this was clearly meant for the Rescue Ranger, meaning its original functionality would have likely worked on some sort of rage meter as opposed to consuming metal, instead requiring the sentry or the engineer to do damage in order to rescue his sentry. This was likely scrapped because it may have been too high of a requirement to utilize the Rescue Ranger's main draw to using it. 489, 490, 491, and 492 are all strangely related to being set bonuses. They specify movement speed bonuses, health regens, crit damage reduce, and fire damage reduce. Stat-altering set bonuses removed on July 10th, 2013, a few months prior to these being added, so what probably happened was the team was beginning to consider removing set bonuses and decided not to implement these. Honestly, very unfair bonuses. As to what sets these may have been in for, listen, this video is already long enough as is, and I can't be bothered to research even more than what's needed. So if you have any ideas as to which ones, comment below and do my job for me. Okay, now summer 2013 rolls in on the decaying hype wave of attribute 532, which has hype decaying over time. Do you get the segue there? This may have been for a balance for the Soda Popper, since it's the only weapon with a hype meter specifically. Oddly enough, the Soda Popper wasn't actually touched with the balance wrench during this update, so maybe this was supposed to be its change. The summer wave is doused by the sounds of love and war, bringing with it the most perplexing attributes included in here, in my personal opinion. 616, 617, and 618 seem to be for Domaman's incredibly old, already scrapped Dynamite Pack. Either that or grenades, but the wording of these leans more towards Dynamite since it detonates recharge time, detonation times, and being primed. Now this is really weird because this was an idea scrapped very long before these attributes popped into existence. Could this mean they were thinking of bringing back the Dynamite as an alternate demo weapon? Or could this mean the Dynamite was planned to make an appearance as an MVM upgrade, similarly to how the engineer can buy an upgrade for a disposable mini-sentry? If it was the latter, I'm sad to have seen something of this caliber go to waste, but demo was and is still a very strong class in MVM. From one explosive class to another, 632 was meant to be a 3-round barrage while explosive jumping. Clearly a beta version of the airstrike, which functions similarly but is based on how many kills the player has gotten with it. Burning away love and war into a jungle on fire, we have Jungle Inferno, which means we're nearing the end, kiddos, but that doesn't mean it's the end of the interesting stuff. With all the changes Jungle Inferno brought with it, that means there had to have been some that were scrapped, and oh boy, there were. Starting with the loser of Meet Your Match, 813 details a minigun that would have given the user pushback immunity while being spun up. While it would be easy to say this was going to be one of the various changes to existing miniguns, I'd like to believe this was a weapon they scrapped for this update and instead decided to work some more on it for, oh, I don't know, the heavy update we're supposed to receive at some point in time. As cynical as I am, this theory gives me a sliver of hope, okay people? Attribute 822 swoops back to the star of Jungle Inferno, Pyro, with a special air blast that would have destroyed projectiles instead of reflecting them. Another interesting air blast concept that never made it into the game. Considering how aggressive of a flamethrower the Dragon's Fury is, maybe this was its original air blast as opposed to the delayed normal one we got. 823, 824, 825, 826, and 827 all alter the attributes of the air blast, removing pushback, pushback stun, view punch, which is that little camera bob that happens when being air blasted, deflecting, which was probably linked to the previous attribute, and extinguishing teammates. This sounds like they were experimenting with various types of compression blasts, trying to see what worked. It's sad we never got a flamethrower with a special air blast like the aforementioned charging air blast or destroying projectiles, but since all of these exist as activatable attributes, in theory, custom weapons could be made using these scrapped attributes as long as they work in-game. Going with the theme of pyro-related things, 845, 846, and 847 seem to reference the gas passer internally as a grenade. Grenades 1, 2, and 3 supply denied sound like how the gas passer is unable to use the resupply cabinet to fill the meter. According to sources though, 845 is actually used by the sandwich? Yeah, I'm not really certain what's going on there, but I believe 846 and 847 are actually unusable. Oh well, just more weird ones to add to the list, I guess. 871 also refers to a pyro weapon. This time the thermal thruster was likely supposed to have its impact radius be a stun ability. This was probably removed due to the team's overall decision to get rid of stun during Jungle Inferno, and as well as the fact that this could have been very abusable. After attribute 880, there's a jump to the 1000s, and past this point things aren't really in chronological order, as well as most not being worth a mention in this already way too long video. Aside from 230, which is called crit on hard hit, which makes me think this was originally intended for some weapon that would calculate the velocity in which the projectile was hit and scale damage from there. Aside from that, not much is worth mentioning past that point. So those were some of the most interesting unused item attributes that can be found within TF2. Some of them shed a light on what the weapons could have been, others give us glimpses into scrapped weapons that never made it past testing, and others, well, they just leave our heads scratching. If you like this video, give a big thanks to Vice since this was his idea and he helped me big time in the research that was required. If you didn't like it, well, blame him too. I was just along as a video maker here, people. Special thanks to Custom Weapons TF2 as well, as he helped me with where some of these item attributes originated from. Go and check out his servers, he runs a bunch of custom-made weapons using existing and new coding. If you're itching to try something new, there's definitely a place to do so. For now, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.